You saw the clip. A veteran at the top of his game, blood on his face, and a season's thread suddenly looking dangerously thin. Aaron Rodgers went down hard against the Bills, the ball popped free, and in one brutal second, the Steelers' afternoon tilted from "we're in control" to "this could define our year." Let's walk through what happened, what it means, and why every fan in Pittsburgh is holding their breath tonight. Rodgers came into Soldier Field already playing with a liability, a fractured left wrist he'd suffered a few weeks earlier. It was the non-throwing hand, and that detail mattered because it let him keep slinging the ball, but it also narrowed the margin for error. He started the game hoping to shepherd Pittsburgh through a critical stretch of the season. He was 6 of 13 for 54 yards before the hit. Not vintage Rodgers, but veteran enough to make things happen. Then Joey Bosa exploded through the pocket early in the second half, drove Rodgers to the turf, and the ball hit the frozen grass. Christian Benford scooped it up and turned it into a touchdown. Suddenly, the scoreboard read a sentence the Steelers didn't want to hear. What made the moment worse was how quickly things unraveled. On the very next series, Mason Rudolph, cold, unprepared, and now thrust into the action, threw an interception to the same Benford. 2 plays, 2 turnovers, a short night that felt very long. That sequence didn't just cost points. It changed the tenor of the game and the team's sense of urgency in the division race. Let's be brutally honest about the optics. A 41-year-old quarterback jogging to the sideline with a bloody nose is cinematic. Fans love the image of the warrior who refuses to bow out. It looks heroic on highlight reels and makes for great post-game chatter. But there's a darker ledger underneath the spectacle, the real risk to long-term health, the potential for compounding injuries, and the ethical question of who gets to decide when a player should stop. Coaches and medical staff face that decision every week, but rarely under such raw scrutiny. Do you sit a franchise legend to preserve his future? Or do you let him try to will his team to victory and hope the immediate payoff is worth the medical risk? In December, those decisions aren't academic. They shift playoff equations, roster planning, and the course of a season. From a schematic perspective, the Steelers were trying to hide the damage. They leaned into pistol formations and quick reads, designed to protect Rodgers' throwing mechanics and reduce stress on his wrist. That's smart football, but schemes only work if the pocket holds. Against an elite rusher like Bosa, half seconds evaporate, and the result was a turnover that swung momentum. Rudolph's interception compounded the problem. Backup QB play is always a gamble. Sometimes the narrative says heroic relief, and sometimes it says 2 costly mistakes. This turned into the latter. There's also a human element that numbers don't capture. Rodgers is a man with family, a long career back, and the very real afterlife of health concerns that follow every player. The applause for toughness is understandable. We cheer the player who stays in. But the best measure of courage sometimes looks a little different. It's the player who follows medical advice and values the life after the helmet as much as the minutes on the field. That's not an anti-competitive argument. It's a human one. Now, what does this do to Pittsburgh's season? If the Steelers lose this game, their margin for error narrows dramatically. They were already fighting to stay relevant in the AFC North. Every game matters. Losing Rodgers for any extended time immediately forces the team into short-term contingency plans. Do they lean on Rudolph until Rodgers is truly healthy? Do they change the offensive identity to protect a backup? Do they start trading for help? None of those options come free. There's also momentum to consider. Football is emotional currency. A turnover returned for a touchdown is a deposit the opposing team can spend all afternoon. The Bills haven't just gotten points, they've gotten confidence. And in a league where belief begets performance, that intangible can ripple beyond this week's box score. We should also call out the role of the offensive line and game planning. A hit like this is rarely the result of one failure. It's the culmination of pressure, protection breakdowns, and the chess match between a rushing front and a quarterback's adjustments. The fixable parts are coachable. Tighten blocking schemes, get the ball out quicker, design higher percentage completions that let the quarterback operate within a narrower risk window. Those are the surgical steps a team takes when the stakes are high and the margin for error is thin. Finally, Let's talk about the locker room consequences. Rodgers' presence matters beyond the snaps he takes. A veteran QB is a living blueprint for teammates: how to prepare, how to lead, how to absorb pressure. When that presence is diminished, even temporarily, the locker room has to find new ways to anchor itself. Younger players look to leaders for composure. If the leader is hurt, others must step up. That's a test of culture, and every organizational identity is revealed by how teams respond to adversity. So where do we go from here? First, we wait for an official medical update. The team's statement will determine the next steps. Second, coaching must adapt. Quicker reads, cleaner protection, conservative aggression, and the team must minimize self-inflicted wounds. Third, the city and the fans need to remember to separate theater from truth, applause the toughness, but hope the doctors do their job. One last thought, because football is a game of theater and consequence. The image of Rodgers bleeding on the sideline will live in social feeds and highlight reels, but the real story will be written in how Pittsburgh responds in the next 2 weeks. Do they tighten up and fight? Do they adapt and survive? Or does this become the pivot point where a promising season becomes a cautionary tale? Either way, tonight's scene is a reminder that heroes in helmets are human too. They make on-field sacrifices we cheer for, and off-field choices we often don't get to see. The bravest play might be the one that keeps a player healthy enough to come back next year and coach another generation. For now, we watch, we hope for the best, and we brace for what comes next. You hated to see it, and you couldn't stop watching it. On a cold Sunday at Acrisure Stadium, Aaron Rodgers took a hit that looked in real time like something out of a slow-motion nightmare. Joey Bosa bulldozed through the pocket, wrapped Rodgers up, the ball popped free, and Bills corner Christian Benford scooped and scored. It was the kind of play that flips the scoreboard and flips the mood of a stadium in the same heartbeat. CBS Sports, Rodgers didn't just lose the ball. He left the field briefly with a bleeding cut across the bridge of his nose. Cameras caught him clutching that already problematic left wrist as he walked off for evaluation, and in an instant, the narrative shifted from big-time Joe to can he actually stay on the field? The visual was ugly. Blood on his face, the hand he throws with protected by a brace, the 41-year-old looking every bit like a guy trying to will his body through pain. WRL News, Mason Rudolph checked in while medical staff worked on Rodgers, and the snap sequence looked like a microcosm of the Steelers' season. Messy, costly, momentum sapping. Rudolph's first series ended with an interception. Benford, who already had the strip sack TD, nabbed the pick as well. The Bills turned a tight game into one with clear control in a matter of 2 possessions. That swing, turnover, scoop and score, turnover again, is exactly what separates playoff teams from pretenders. CBS Sports, let's be careful about one thing. Rodgers